and welcome everybody to the Mindspring Capital podcast. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to have a very special guest on today. Not only is he a broadcast visionary, having set up the sports channel in Israel, done many things outside of the country as well that we're going to hear about, but way beyond that, a very good friend of mine for over 20 years now. Can you believe? Over 20 years. Not a lot of people might know that, but we go back quite a way since we first met. Mylan Tanzer, a wonderful opportunity to have you on this podcast. How you doing?
Great. It's a real honor to be in the Daniel Bernard podcast.
It's not the Daniel Bernard podcast.
Well, it is the Daniel Bernard podcast. You're also a friend, so it's a double pleasure.
Absolutely. So, obviously I know, but tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself. Give us in a rather large nutshell what Mylan is all about, where you came from, and just a little bit of background so we understand your history.
Okay, well, I was, as you can tell from my accent, I was born and raised in the U.S., in the Pacific Northwest. In 1981, at the age of 23, which now you can make the calculation how old I am.
About 87.
Maths
was never my strong point. Or nor was sensitivity.
Well, yeah. My kids make worse jokes about my age, so I'm not worried. I'm tough.
Tough enough, yeah.
I immigrated to Israel in 1981. Finished a master's degree. Did my military service. Came out, did all sorts of various jobs related to my kind of Zionist background, and then in 1989, the end of 1989, I was kind of at the right place at the right time. And I became the head of the first sports channel in Israel, just when the cable revolution was taking off and sports channels were kind of emulating the ESPN model, kicking up all over the world. That happened in Israel, of course. And from end of 1989 to 2005, I was the CEO and shareholder in the sports channel, left in 2005, following an ownership shakeup. Which actually I was glad, because it was probably time after almost 16 years of very, very intense, very intensive regimen. It was maybe time for a change, made an exit, and then I actually began to do the same thing in Eastern Europe, in Romania, launching these sports channels with the partner who I had at the sports channel, who ended up taking over when I left. And we worked together in Romania, came back in about 2011. And since then I've been consulting for media platforms, for leagues, federations and governing bodies, government agencies dealing with sports, sports tech companies. And that's basically what kind of has brought me to this day. And now I'm working with the Israeli Premier Football Leagues. I'm working also with a division of DAZN, go back and forth to the UK about once a month, and of course Mindspring Capital, doing investments, and that's really, probably the most, well, I think they're all interesting, but that definitely is something that has really been an amazing experience so far.
I agree, and I'd love to talk, we'll talk a bit later about the sports technology investments that you're involved in Mindspring, and of course I'm part of that and delighted, and it's a fascinating space, especially now. Let's go back to the main focus in the sports industry that has always been yours, which is the broadcast area. And I use the word broadcast visionary very deliberately, because I think a lot of the way sports is broadcast, especially in this country, is because of the way you foresaw how it needs to be broadcast, especially given your background, and maybe just this sixth sense about how consumers need to consume sport. And it was my great pleasure to be involved for the first time in the broadcast industry when you gave me a job and took pity on a new immigrant in this country back in 2001, I think it was. And I've been involved in the sports industry ever since. It's over 20 years for me in the sports industry. And for me, being involved in broadcast at the beginning is a wonderful grounding, because you get to see sports across the board. You get to understand how a football match, for example, is set up, how the production of that works, the sponsorship and advertising at the stadium, how people in the stadium engage with the sport, people at home engage with the sport. And I felt that served me very, very well for a career in the sports industry that I've enjoyed up until since then, basically, and up until now. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about broadcast specifically. I remember when we used to walk around Sportel, which is the major market for broadcast rights, and I'm talking about 2002, 2003. back then, we're talking about 20 years ago now, you were talking to me about, you were saying, have a look down and see what's going on. There's convergence coming. And what you were talking about was between traditional broadcast and what has now become maybe considered over the top through IP streaming and things like that. It's 20 years ago you were talking about that. What are your thoughts about what's happened since those times up until now?
Well, first I have to start with a little anecdote, because you talked about the fact that you started working for about 2001. And just to tell everybody, this is, I think, very indicative of who Daniel Bernard is.
This is a Mylan podcast, yeah. This is not my podcast.
Well, this will be the Mylan moment.
Okay, fine.
I think it was like 99 or something like that. A mutual friend of mine, of ours from the industry, well, actually, a friend of mine from the industry who was based out of the UK, working at an agency in the UK, was actually a relative of Daniel, said, I have a nephew, he's in Israel, he's kind of involved
trying to get by.
In Israel, everybody tries to get by.
That's true.
He has an Israeli girlfriend, they're going to get married, I don't know, and maybe you could just talk to him about a job. And I said, well, for you, I'll be more than happy to do it. And a few weeks later, I got a call, hi, I'm this person's relative, I'd like to come for an interview. My secretary set it up. Daniel came in for an interview, had a very nice conversation, I was very impressed with him, but the problem is he didn't speak any Hebrew. And I said that, listen, even though there's a lot of work to do internationally, still the whole company is Israeli. Everybody speaks Hebrew. If you don't speak Hebrew, you're really not going to fit in. And so go and learn Hebrew. And I figured that would be the last I see of Daniel. But not that long after that, I thought it was about 6 months. When talking to Daniel, he said it was more like a year and a half. My secretary got another call. Hey, that Daniel Bernard guy who you met with a ways back wants to meet with you again. So, again, because of our mutual contact, I wasn't going to say no. Daniel came in, spoke fluent Hebrew, and
I took your advice. You told me to go and learn. I went and learned. I tried to listen. I tried.
Well, you also didn't give me a choice.
That's right.
And I brought you in, but it was the best decision I ever made. So that's the story of Daniel Bernard. So, if you give him a challenge.
Thank you very much. Let's go back.
You'll hear back from him.
Yeah, you can't get rid of me. When I want something, you can't get rid of me. All right, back to the broadcast industry and the convergence. Yeah, because after you gave me that job and took pity on a young man in Israel, and obviously we worked. I was working for you for 3.5 years in the end, which was an amazing privilege, and I learned a hell of a lot. We'll talk about that maybe later on, but. One of the things I want to talk about is specifically the broadcast industry and how it's developed since then. And as I say, 20 years ago, you were talking about, and I was trying to learn about the coming convergence.
Right.
How do you see that as being?
Well, yeah, I remember we were talking about that a lot. I was talking about it a lot, and to be honest, I was, using the word convergence without knowing what the hell it meant. I mean, it just sounded good. I mean, obviously, internet, was becoming, broadband was beginning to be rolled out, and it was kind of the end of dial-up internet. So it was clear that sports obviously was going to be a big part of that, and it already was a big part of that. And so it was very interesting. Everybody was talking about and then we were talking only about linear broadcast and the internet. That was basically talking about convergence. I mean, who thought about the smartphone in 2001, 2002, 2003? Who could have ever? Well, Steve Jobs could have, I guess, but that's why he was a real visionary. I mean, not me. But
two of you should have had a chat.
I'll take it. It shouldn't be mentioned in the same sentence, but thanks anyway. I think, talking about it back then, I think there was the first indication of what could be called convergence was what Perform was doing. And full disclosure here for a moment, because as I say, I'm now working with the Zone, which Perform developed into the Zone. And in fact, the division I work for is actually kind of a legacy department of Perform. But they were really the real pioneers here, because they were basically for the betting industry. They were taking video streams and they were taking video and turning it into streams for the betting platform as an incentive for bettors. Which obviously that that's your industry, you know it better than I do. But that was really a breakthrough moment, I think, for what you could call convergence in terms of the web serving a really important function for sports streaming. But I think when we now talk about convergence, if we can talk about it, I think that obviously the smartphone was the, breakthrough, groundbreaking, earthquake enabler, obviously. But I think it was only really until Netflix was launched that streaming becomes something that was so accessible, so normal almost, that now I think we're really in a completely different area. And if we talked about convergence back then, I think what maybe we meant is what's happening now. So I think that's the first thing. I mean, the fact that Netflix changed the game for everybody, I think that really was, again, the seminal moment. And now it's almost normal to have sports streamed on OTT. Now, if you think about maybe the word convergence, when it was bantered around back then, I think now if you look at how the market is divided, you're actually seeing convergence, which I would never expect it to see it this way. I don't think anybody really could have foreseen it. But the fact that you have all of the linear broadcasters, the legacy broadcasters, all have gone also OTT because they realize they have to be there. The audience is going there; they have to be there as well. And those OTT platforms, such as again DAZN or 11 Sports, which DAZN has bought, or Eurosport Player, for example, which is now part of Discovery. I mean, all of those are actually also looking at linear options. A lot of them are now have linear channels. Yeah. You can see DAZN on linear channels in various parts of the world. So it's almost like the two sides of the equation, the linear broadcast side and the OTT, are converging because each one needs each other.
Right.
They need each other, and you can get into that various reasons why. Obviously, for the linear broadcasters, that's where the audience is for a lot of us, and for the OTT broadcasters, it's not an easy roll of the dice to all of a sudden having the most premium and premier content on OTT only, financially, technologically, in terms of infrastructure and everything like that. So it also makes sense. So it's almost like each side is converging on the other.
That's interesting.
And then you have what could be another potential game changer. I'm sure we'll talk about it as the podcast goes on. The Apple TV deal with the MLS.
Oh yes, that looks like that really seems like a bit of a disruptor compared to other leagues and the way the deals are made.
Right. I think it potentially has huge implications for disruption. Because that kind of, I developed this philosophy there, this idea that here, linear sports broadcast is converging with OTT, and OTT is converging with linear from their side, and this could throw that theory, out the window.
Let's just remind everyone what that deal actually was, because it was a fairly recently signed deal,
right? And
it, we're talking about Major League Soccer in the US, which is not one of the top leagues, but it's certainly one that is structured well, I think, from a rights perspective. If you just remind everyone what actually happened there and how it's different to the way the major leagues, especially the European leagues, run their broadcast.
Right. Well, it was first of all, 10-year deal, and you're finding long-term deals are becoming much more of the norm, which is something that's very important for streaming, by the way, I think, to have long-term deals. Generally, you have a 3-year rights cycle. I think we're seeing more and more, rights cycles now being expanded, 4 or 5 years. The financial commitments that broadcasters have to make to rights holders are such that they need more time to monetize, especially if we're talking about the digital side of it. So it's a 10-year deal, $2.5 billion, which isn't huge amounts of money in today's sums, but I think the concept in and of itself is what's interesting.
Well, considering it's a niche sport in the US.
It's not a niche sport, but it's it's lowest on the rung in terms of team sports.
It's way below NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. Those are the top 4. Right. Soccer is up and coming still, but there's no way that it closes up on those top 4. But the deal basically means that you cannot watch MLS anywhere but Apple.
Well, except there will be I know there will be like I guess a certain amount of one match a week or something like that on on ESPN or linear broadcast. So yeah, but you can't.
The vast majority is all on Apple.
Oh yeah, the vast majority.
If you're an MLS fan, you've got to watch on Apple. Whereas if you're looking at Premier League or Serie A, French League, the rights are distributed across multiple providers, and it seems to maybe offer a lot of clarity for the user. He doesn't have to get many subscriptions. He just knows Apple is the one for MLS. Do you see that continuing to other leagues? Will other people adopt that going forward?
Well, everybody in this industry, everybody in terms of the platforms who need to acquire content, the elephant on the table is the technological giants.
Yeah.
When are they really going to get involved? And I'm not talking about what Amazon has done in the UK with 2 rounds a year of the Premier League, or the ATP tennis and that type of thing. Taking these dives, or what Facebook has done here and there. I'm not talking about these deals that are for a partial package of the content or something like that. I'm talking about taking over a sport, because in theory, the money, the finance required to buy, let's say, the global rights for the Premier League is a hell of a lot of money for any broadcaster or any platform, but not for the technological giants if they wanted to invest that money. So the question is if they're going to do that, if they're not going to do that, and this is really the first example. Again, not the premium content that is, let's say, must have on a global basis, but it is an up and coming sport, and it's demographically in the U.S. it's growing more and more in popularity, and that obviously was not lost on Apple when they did it. So the question is if this deal is going to be a precedent, and you're going to see the Amazons and the Googles and the Microsofts or whoever are Apples get involved in becoming the global platform, the global gatekeeper for these premium rights, which really will be a potentially cataclysmic moment for the broadcast industry as we know it, and as it's developing today. But I think it's a very cool deal. I really like it. I think they, Amazon has the kind of the slogan in the UK. I think they use it for what they're doing in the UK. Your game, your way. And I think Apple kind of saw, this is kind of the philosophy that we want to have now for the MLS, because it is, a kind of a different kind of demographic, a younger demographic, a demographic that is definitely digital first. So I think that's kind of, they see it as kind of an investment, and can obviously become an infrastructure, or become the foundation for a lot of other things. Another really cool thing about it is that if you are a season ticket holder for a club in the MLS, you automatically get an Apple MLS subscription on Apple TV, right? For games outside of your.
You get a phone as well.
Well, if that's the case, maybe you can sign up. So they probably have some kind of incentives, I'm sure. Give us, commit to 25 years and we get a phone,
the usual. Yeah. Absolutely. No, but that's really interesting that you can get a subscription at least to the service. It makes total sense.
Right. For games outside of your home area, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that part of the incentive here for Apple was thinking towards World Cup 2026, and America is going to do what America does. We've got the World Cup in 2026 shared between Canada, the US, and Mexico.
Right.
There's going to be this increase in interest in soccer.
Well, the MLS was actually born out of the '94 World Cup, which is in the US. Yeah. So I hadn't thought of that. That's probably very, very true. And plus, as I said, demographically, soccer in the US is, the US is becoming such a different demographic in terms of ethnicities. And obviously, most of the ethnic, football being the world game, they obviously flock to it in the US. And I think that's also a very, very important component in what Apple's doing here.
We're going to take a quick break. I've got a surprise for you.
Oh, I don't know if I like surprises.
Well, look, you couldn't come.
I generally
on the Mindspring Capital podcast and not have a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Mindspring, we are surprised.
I've made some Mylan cards. There we go. You see?
I think one is enough of.
How many Mylans can you see here? Okay.
Oh man.
So we got Mylan cards. Each card, Mr. Tanzer, has a question on it that you are unprepared for. Now, I could have gone for embarrassing questions given the fact that I've known you for over 20 years, but I didn't. I spared you. But there are hopefully questions that will trigger maybe some thoughts.
Have you been hacking into my computer or anything?
Yeah, don't worry about it. You just keep doing what you're doing. Anyway, here you go. Pick a card. What's the first Mylan card?
It's dangerous to know technological people.
Have a read.
What was the most uplifting sporting event that you have ever attended? Wow.
Well, because I put this question for you because I know that one of your passions is going to watch live events.
Free tickets.
Free tickets. It's always been about the free tickets.
There's nothing for free. In all my many years, even though you get something without paying for it, you've paid for it one way or the other.
No such thing as a free lunch, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I think when you have enough experience, you realise that.
Right.
But in your plethora of free, not free tickets that you've enjoyed over the last year, and I know I've been to some football matches with you. In fact, before you answer, I've got a memory. One year we were at Sportel, must have been around that same time, we met, I don't know if you remember this.
In Milano.
In Milano for a game, a Champions League game. It was my first ever Champions League game. It was a group stage game between Milan and Ajax.
Right.
And I remember, how I felt when the players come out as the champions and all that. And I was so excited as all my life a football fan. And you looked at me and you were smiling. I looked at you, I was like, what? And you were like, just nodding away. And you said, it's so nice to see you excited like this because it reminds me of how I felt on my first Champions League game. And you were at that stage, the experienced guru, had been to so many Champions League games and finals and everything, and you were reminiscing about your own first time experience through me. And I have to tell you, I've obviously since had that because I've had the privilege and the pleasure of being in a number of great sporting events, and I have since taken a couple of people that filled that role. And that pleasure when you look back at it is something. So I remember, and I thank you very much for that, because we met at the San Siro. I remember we had a ridiculous drive back to Monaco.
Yeah.
About 4 hours on the road.
Yeah.
Anyway, but,
I think I fell asleep.
I think we were back.
But we're still here. So.
Amazing, we're here still.
Well, I remember that because the great thing about having you with me is that you speak a lot of languages, one of them Italian, so you could translate all the things the Rossoneri fans were saying. It was great. I finally understood, I obviously nothing to repeat here.
Exactly. It's a family show. You can't repeat what goes on in an Italian football stadium. But yeah, there's so much aggression and swearing and everything. And
but to have you there to translate it for me was like, wow. Actually, I thought of this earlier.
I've hijacked this question. You've got to tell me your major event.
You did hijack it, but you hijacked it in the right place. I think Champions League is the best place to start because I was fortunate enough to have met our mutual friend, our managing partner at Mindspring, Craig Thompson, back in '95 when he was the CEO of team marketing running the Champions League. He was basically one of the three people who initiated it. Anybody who on LinkedIn knows this already because we've all repeated it 100 times. But and because we became a broadcast partner at that point at the Sports Channel in Israel, Champions League, Craig and I, remained in good contact. We were both two American West Coast expats living, overseas, and we kind of had a mutual connection. We kept that connection. So Champions League became kind of a big part of my professional life. And two finals are I know you wanted one event, but two finals are I have to select. One was the 1999 final in Barcelona between Manchester United and Bayern Munich, which was the most amazing.
It was a terrible game, apart from the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a really boring game.
Right. But if you were a supporter of Man U, which I kind of was, I guess, I'm not...
Glory support.
What's that?
Glory support.
Well, yeah, you might say. No, but because I really admired Man U because we were also a Premier League rights holder in the 90s when Man U was really becoming the powerhouse in the Premier League, and they did kind of capture the imagination.
Of course. Yeah.
And I think if I think back on one player who I really stands out and somebody who I admire, you can say what you want about him, is Eric Cantona, because as a showman, as somebody who we were showing the Premier League, we wanted to make it as much of a show as possible. He was really doing the work for us. So I do have a warm spot in my heart for Manchester United. And so it was a bad game, but if you want Manchester United to win, it's like, you're tense all the time, so it's okay. Especially the way it turned out was absolutely amazing, even though I did feel sorry for the Bayern Munich fans. And there are a lot of very interesting stories and anecdotes that we've heard from Craig about that game, which we won't get into now. But that was amazing. And then I would say also the 2005 final in Istanbul, Liverpool and Milan.
I knew you were going to bring that one up. Honestly. Go on. Tell me just remember.
Nothing to say. It was all any as we say, call me on utera here in Israel. Every word is redundant.
Unbelievable. Leading 3-0 at half time. Milan. It looks like it's all over, and then Liverpool come back to win it. Unbelievable. I remember. But do you remember that there's a personal thing here? And why does this pinch me when you mentioned that 2005? You don't remember?
Memory,
About a month before the final, you called me up. It's 2005, finals in Istanbul. And you called me up and you say, Daniel, I've got 2 tickets to the Champions League final. Do you want to come? And I, like an idiot, said, I got too many things on, too many commitments, and I basically said no. And I remember you sent me a text after the final whistle, which in my memory was something like, I can't believe you're not here, you missed an amazing match. And in my mind, it was just like, you're such an idiot. That's how I translated it. Actually, maybe that's what you wrote. I don't know. Maybe I just calmed it down over the years in my memory. But for me, that was such a lesson. When you get offered Champions League tickets, don't make excuses. When you get offered a great thing to do in life, don't make excuses. Just do it. Just go. Do what the Nike commercial says. Just do it.
Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. Exactly. There's always a reason not to do things in life. Find that one reason to just go and do it. And I was sitting.
If that's what came out of the game for you, then it was maybe good you didn't come. I had a great time. Let me tell you about it.
I'm sitting at home watching it, thinking, what am I doing here? Unbelievable.
But there is one thing I want to say that even about on this question about the most uplifting sporting event. These were exciting. These were great. And this is what we love, sports. But there was something that was really uplifting that I wasn't there, but I saw it on TV. And I have to mention it in this context because it really kind of cemented my love of sports, because sports transcends. And it was the World Cup final of rugby in 1995 in South Africa, and it was the final of the Springboks playing. I think it was New Zealand.
New Zealand, that's right. An amazing event.
And nobody expected South Africa to win it. And South Africa had just come out of apartheid, and Nelson Mandela was sitting in the stands in the stadium, and he had a Springbok jersey on, which if you look at just that, had South Africa not even won, but just have Nelson Mandela wearing a Springbok jersey. I mean, Nelson Mandela, the iconic fighter against apartheid, and the Springboks, one of the iconic symbols of apartheid. Just how important and what an amazing historical figure he was. And then the fact that South Africa won, and he came onto the pitch and gave the cup to, I think it was Joel Stransky, who's a Jewish guy. That's also another connection.
Yeah.
Who's the captain of the Springboks. That was, I remember sitting in my office, our office, and having a small TV kind of over my desk, and just wow, being completely amazed. I mean, just stunned.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a significant event way beyond sport. I think it's a really good example of how sport really transcends just the combat of two teams on the pitch. It's way beyond that. It touches people's lives. I think that's one of the reasons why any of us who work in the sports industry, we love it, because it's not just about the sport. It's about how it touches us and our emotions. And when it goes to that level of not only national significance for South Africa, but international significance coming out of apartheid, unbelievable, absolutely. And what a symbol and an ability to bring people together through that one unbelievable legend that was Nelson Mandela.
Well, I think you mentioned, emotions. I think there's two words, emotions. You mentioned transcend that I mentioned. Those two terms, I think, when they converge.
Go back to convergence again.
When converge, it's like, it's really what we're all about.
Fantastic.
And almost in any sporting event, there is, if you are attached to it one way or the other, you find an emotional connection. And then the question is, of course, who is bringing that match to you, if you're not in the venue, how they successfully tell that story. That's really the key. So
it's all about how the story is told again.
Exactly.
Right. And with sport, it's too easy. To tell the story through sport is very simple, because it touches our heartstrings, all of us.
Yeah, and then if you have the people behind the scenes who are doing the work, they have to be aware of that, and they have to be able to bring that home. So
Great answer. See, these cards are not so scary. I'm not going to tell you what's on the other two, but these cards are so scary. We've talked a lot about broadcasting, your thoughts about OTT going forward. Let's turn our attention to present day, where, as you say, you're involved in a lot of projects and you're consulting to a lot of bodies in that specific area, in that specific domain, but you are also, and this is one of our joys, we spoke about it, investing in sports technology companies. Tell us a little bit about your sentiments around that, around where sports tech is at the moment. We've gone through... We're here in September 2022, where 2021 everyone was investing generally in the VC world, and sports was no different. 2022, there's been a downturn. Do you see there being any risk to sports technology investment? Do you see what do you see for the next 2-3 years of it? Which are the main verticals that you think are going to really play out here?
Well, I mean, first of all, there is a downturn now, obviously, although not necessarily, as far as I know, in quantity of investments, but in terms of the amounts being invested. And I think a lot of VCs recognize an opportunity that valuations are lower now because of the overall global financial situation, and they're taking advantage of that.
Is it taking advantage, or is it just more correct? I mean, I'll be honest. Some of the valuations that we were seeing last year just seemed ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
well taken.
When people were talking about setting a valuation based on a multiple of revenues in 4 years, I was sitting there going, "This is." I mean, it's not like I'm that hugely experienced in investing. I've only been doing it for 3 years or so, but that seemed mad. You know, I feel like one of the things I like in Mindspring as well is all the partners are, you know, we're operators. We've all built businesses in our different verticals. And I think a business needs to make money. And sometimes in the investment world, you think, I'm a bit old-fashioned that way. I think, you know, but sometimes you sit around the VC.
I know.
Seriously, you think, is anyone
Who needs to make money?
It's like, yeah, we just need to make a raise. We just need to exit. And I'm like, this is crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
So I actually see some of the down there, and I'm sorry to have interrupted you there, but I think that the valuations we're seeing today are much more logical and much healthier for the industry.
No, you know, and you're 100% right there. And you know what, in our partner discussions, partner meetings over the last before the war in Ukraine and before the global downturn, what was a recurring motif in our discussions? Is this going to be a bubble that's going to blow up? Is this going to be a bubble that's going to blow up? So, you know, had the financial downturn not taken place, maybe it would have been a bubble that would have blown up. Maybe this has been the correction that it needed. So I
definitely believe that, and a lot of people, myself included, make comparisons between the dot-com bubble of 2000 and now. And one thing I think we need to remember is the dot-com bubble was basically saying, you know, all these internet investments back then. The internet continued and grew. It's not like it just exploded. What exploded was all the non-worthy investments.
Right.
And that's just what has to happen. If people are creating businesses that aren't actually in demand, aren't actually of value, but they're managing to raise because there's FOMO and whatever, people want to shove money at it, then those, you know, taking the emotion out of it and the difficulty. I mean, we're both founders. It's a difficult thing, but if you take the emotion of the angst of those founders when their business goes under, but if it's not providing value, if it's not giving something that the industry needs, that the world needs, then that's what has to happen. And the good companies will always survive, through a bubble or not. And that's what I think we're seeing now as well, is that the companies that will fall away are the ones that got overinvested and couldn't manage, or they didn't know how to execute, or bad luck. It could be a combination of all of those, you know. But the good companies, the ones that really provide value to this world and going forward, or a massive disruption, they will survive. Doesn't matter how overinflated the investment market is.
No. I 100%. I agree with you. You're spot on there, and you know, I think we've seen a lot of. I mean, let's say in Israel, which you know is a quite a active sports tech environment. You know, we see so many different companies who come to us, or I wouldn't call them companies necessarily. They're somewhere between ideas and companies. You know, and we know that they are, you know, bringing solutions to problems that don't necessarily exist. Now, that's obviously a non-starter in most people's books, and it should be a non-starter. But I think, as you pointed out, sometime in one of our discussions, you know, Facebook was solving a problem that didn't exist either.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really an interesting thing, and that's really the challenge I think we have here in terms of like trying to look at technologies that are going to be more and more dominant. I mean, it's hard for me to say because my orientation is more in terms of the video and content side, but that's a huge part of the whole sports tech revolution, I think. And I think so many technologies out there that enable our content to be more accessible, obviously short form content. I look at my kids who are sports fans, you know, galore, and while they do like to watch the live game of their favorite teams, they don't have a problem missing it to do other things. And then literally minutes after something happens, they find a way to access the highlight, mostly probably, you know, not legally necessarily. But I think all technologies that can regulate that on the one hand, that make it more accessible, that can make the whole viewer experience more interesting, which I think is something that is really one of the most interesting areas. Is like I think virtual overlays on OTT platforms to make it more engaging, crowd watching, additional feeds, the data that you can overlay, and all the benefits that can derive. I really think that's an area that can continue to develop because I think the whole idea of viewing in sports, which again is, as we grew up, it's a linear experience, and still for the top-notch events, it is a true linear experience. But the bread and butter of sports, the mass amounts of content, are going to need to be accessible in a very, very interesting, seamless way on the go. And I think a lot of things are accessible on the go, but you're going to have to make that experience something comparable to what the digital first generation experiences on other platforms. And it's not an easy challenge when we talk about live video and so on and so forth. But I think all of those technologies, and there are a lot of them out there that contribute to that, whether it be like, the WSCs of the world or various other stream layers, those types of companies who are all in that area. I think those are really going to be huge growth areas. And I think the whole, the ability to integrate, let's say, things that you're more familiar with, let's say from the betting industry and gamification in general, are also going to be offshoots of that technology, because they're going to be part of it and they're going to benefit from that as well. So those, I think, are the general technology. Again, from my orientation, from the areas that I purport to understand.
Yeah. No, I agree totally. I mean, and your area of expertise, and especially that's one of the things as well, is when someone's been involved in a specific industry for so long, it allows them to be, use that word again, visionary. It's just through experience of trying to guess. At the end of the day, we're all guessing. It's just some of us have better guesses than others. But trying to guess what will be the demands of the market going forward, rather than what are the problems to be solved today. A lot of people in the investment world get fixated in what problem you're solving. And I personally don't like that question, because some of the most disruptive technologies are not solving a problem of today. They're creating a demand or solving a demand of the future that people don't know. We talk about Facebook. I've said this many, many times, that no one was walking around in 2004 saying, I wish I had a platform where I could show pictures of my food and my cattle. It wasn't like a problem that people had that Facebook solved. And that's where the most disruptive technologies are. And I think you're right that when it comes to video, which is such a broad area, it covers everything. You mentioned betting, which is a specific vertical that I've had a lot of experience in. I think that two-way interaction of the consumer with the content is critical, rather than it just being, here's a two-dimensional piece of content that I consume. Being able to interact through companies, you mentioned Streamlayer, companies like that, where you've got overlays and you can have that interactive, more gamified experience. I agree with you totally. That's the way things are going.
Oh, it has to go that way. Because again, if sports do not, continue the OTT revolution, it's not enough to just have a linear experience, on your connected device. You have to have all of the other components that make the connected device experience relevant.
Absolutely.
On sports, and that's really the challenge. And look, on the way over here, I was streaming the Vuelta España, on the Eurosport player, and all week I've been watching the Eurobasket, the European Championship basketball, on courtside 1991. Again, full disclosure, I'm involved with that, but I've been, and it's been fantastic because I've been all over the place, and I've really been watching live streams. There's nothing like it.
You are really the epitome of Gen Z, Mylan, I think.
Yeah, well,
time for another Mylan card. Okay, that's how I look.
Gen Z. Somebody asked me, right? My 64th birthday a few months ago. They asked me, what does it feel like to be 64? I said, feels like 16 4 times. So I am like Gen Z.
All right, Mr. Gen Z, time for another Mylan card.
All right.
Read it out loud, please.
Recount a moment in your career that you recall as your greatest win.
Ooh, greatest win. That's a nice one.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time, not because I've had so many wins. I have to try to remember one.
I don't believe that for a second.
No, self-deprecating humor.
Of course.
You grew up in
As always.
the American Jewish.
American Jew, exactly. You've got to play them all.
Well, obviously, being in the sports broadcast and production industry for basically my whole professional life, the saying "content is king," as old as cliche as it is, it's still true. And most of our conversations kind of, basically vindicated that cliche. And so, obviously, running a sports platform in a competitive environment, you have to get the rights, and you have to get the big rights if you can. And I think one moment comes to mind in particular. It was 1999, again that year, magic year, when I first met Daniel Bernard.
It's when everything happened. It's when everything happened.
Right. And then, of course, the great final in Barcelona was 1999 Bayern. And we were, again, Sports Channel, we'd been on the air for 9 years, but, we were still a cable channel. And again, the broadcast environment, maybe outside of the U.S., which had ESPN, was still linear oriented or linear, in terms of terrestrial oriented, not linear, terrestrial oriented. And, cable channels were still the underdogs. We succeeded after a long, drawn out, very, very, I won't say bloody, that's kind of over dramatic, but, competitive process. We won the rights to the Israeli Premier Football League. And that was kind of against all the odds for various reasons. I won't get into them now. I recall working very closely with my colleague at the time, who was our CFO, Yono Wiesenthal, who was very instrumental, very clever. We would devise a midnight strategy, what we're going to do the next morning, and we kind of implemented it in a commando manner. And we ended up
intriguing.
Yeah. No, there were some. Yeah, maybe when the statute of limitations runs out, we'll write our memoirs. But yeah, it was an amazing moment. It was like. It was really amazing. It was like we had the most important content, the top of the ladder content, the things that was must have in the market was now going to be on our channels, and it was really an amazing moment. Little did we know that 2.5 years later, our market would fall, and we'd have our financial crash. 2001, when the high-tech bubble burst. We were talking about high-tech bubbles. Really, the high-tech bubble burst, and Israel and is now very, very high-tech oriented economy. And things happened in our industry, which kind of shortened our 6-year deal to a 3-year deal. But it doesn't diminish a moment from it doesn't diminish at all from that moment when we won it. And I think we also did fantastic things in terms of broadcasting it, producing it, doing things that had never been done in the market before, which I think, really set us up as the market leader and, really are the way it's done to this day in the market.
Wonderful. It's great. When you've got those moments that you feel like it all comes together, you just clasp your hands together and just think, wow, that's fantastic. It's really those champagne moments that you'll want to hold on to throughout your career. So that's lovely. All righty. Let's talk a little bit about Israel. Both of us are immigrants to this quite crazy and amazing country. You from the US, myself from the UK. Israel's quite an incredible country, and we talk about sports tech here, but I don't want to only talk about sports tech, but I think that if people don't actually know what the map of the world looks like, if you're in the sports tech industry, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Israel is actually a much bigger country than it really is. It sometimes amazes me, the footprint that this country has in the sports world, but in the technological world anyway. What are your thoughts on that? Coming from the States and being here now, you've been here, how much, 42 years now?
I don't need to exaggerate, 41.
41 years. I apologize. Yeah. 41 years, obviously the majority of your life still. Two-thirds of your life. So what are your thoughts on being an immigrant in this country and what it means to be Israel in 2022 from a technological superpower that we've actually become?
That's an interesting thought. Again, because I don't come from a technological background, I'm not, an engineer or never learned to write code or anything like that. And
it's never too late.
In my case, it might be. Never really thought of myself necessarily as an early adapter. And I think what I do understand of technology, I can thank Mr. Jobs for for giving me the opportunity to learn, understand more, and so on and so forth. Tweak my curiosity. I think from my point of view, first of all, I'm very thankful that that's the situation because if you want to stay relevant in the industry, in our industry, you really have to at least have an overview of technology and its implications and what it does for sports. And being very involved in sports production my whole career, you also have to have kind of an overview of technology because everything is so technologically oriented. But things change. What was relevant back then is not necessarily relevant now. But being in the environment of the Israel sports tech surroundings, has really afforded me the opportunity to remain relevant. And if I think now I don't even want to really necessarily be involved in linear broadcast or production. It doesn't really interest me anymore. It interests me because that's where I came from. But it's really more the OTT side, the digital side, the technological side, and all of that. And that's also part of why we're doing what we're doing at Mindspring. That's also very interesting. But I think historically, if you really want to understand why Israel has become the way it has become technologically and also sports tech, but technology, I would recommend a book called Startup Nation. It was written about 10, 12 years ago, so in some cases it's out of date, but I think the opening chapter deals with Shai Agassi and Better Place and so on and so forth, which we all know what happened with the electric car Better Place venture, folded. But I think it gives a really good idea why Israel has become such a technological giant. It's really all sorts of cultural and sociological factors and ethnic and religious factors as well. And I recommend reading the book. It's an easy read. It's 150 pages. You can read it on a flight or read it in 2 nights, basically. And it really gives you an idea of why, an immigrant culture whose economy, when the country was founded in 1948, had the same GDP as America in the Civil War, has now become what it's become. Read the book. It's really great, but it really gives the idea of why we've become such a technological giant. Obviously, a lot of that is because of the military. I think looking historically, you can see all technological, breakthroughs come as a result of military technology. The microwave, for example, so many others, Velcro, whatever. I mean, the examples are endless. But in terms of Israel, the fact that we are constantly in a survival mode, and we still are, even though it's very easy to forget. Our day-to-day life is very nice. We live a life that you could probably live in any Western developed, successful country in the world, but not far below the surface. We are, in a survival mode, and we have, multiple threats 24/7 that we have to deal with. And technology has been, one of the ways that we've been able to survive. So obviously that is going to penetrate into civilian society, and it's a good thing it has, and that's why we are who we are. So thank you very much to all our enemies.
I remember the leader of the UAE has said a quote, and I'm going to misquote it because I can't remember the exact details, but I think it was very poignant. And he said something like, his grandfather rode a camel, his father rode a camel, he rides in a Mercedes, his son will ride in a Mercedes, and his grandson will ride in a camel again. Something like that. And he said, hard times make strong men. Easy times make weak men. And he was foreseeing, because the United Arab Emirates is going through an absolute golden period at the moment of strength, and really at the forefront of innovation and many things. This small country in the Middle East, who Israel is now very good friends with, and he's foreseeing the future, that if now we're in this lovely, luxurious period where everything is going well for us, we should be on our guard, because easy times and good times make weak people. And I think that's, to your point, when you're in a situation where you're fighting for survival and times are hard, you become much more adaptable. You become quicker and on your toes. And I definitely agree with that as being one of the reasons why Israeli companies are very quick to move and take advantage of opportunities.
Well, that's now that you mentioned that. I mean, for example, Startup Nation, he talks about the fact that we are amazing improvisers, and that's one of the things you need to survive against, being outnumbered by your enemies, who have the advantage in not only numbers but also in geographical area and resources and everything like that. You have to be very crafty and clever. And he talks about the fact that Israelis, when they hit a wall in terms of thoughts and technology and development and everything like that, they don't stop and bring in a consultant and figure out what they're going to do and solve it by consensus. They individually go, they find a way to deal with it. So we're fantastic improvisers. I think we're lousy long-term. Excuse me.
Yeah, because we don't have a long-term. We have no idea what's going to happen here.
Exactly.
Talk about a five-year plan. We don't have a 5-day plan like in this country sometimes.
We're very lousy long-term planners, which is why, I think the whole strive to make an exit is really the mentality here.
Yeah.
And, we don't have any, well, we do have a few, but I don't think, unicorns are few and far between. I mean, we're not going to have any technological giants because, we make our exits and we help make those technological giants, even stronger and bigger. Yeah. But, that's, and, when we were in the Army, there was a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, back to what the leader of the UAE said, it's so true. It really is.
Absolutely. Time for another Mylan card. Your final one.
Pink.
There you go. Read the question out loud, please, Mr. Tanzer.
Tell us about a time in your career when nothing went right. Tell us about the black hole. Well, that's two questions.
Well,
choose which one.
Okay.
Because nothing went right. It's like that's almost par for the course.
I'm looking for
especially in Israel. But,
I'm looking for that one moment.
The black hole.
Yeah.
Okay, the black hole.
When everything was like, I have no idea what's going to happen here, and how am I going to get out of this? And
the black hole moment's pretty easy to, I think, put my finger on, or dive into, or fall into, or get lost in. That was when we talked earlier about the high-tech bubble bursting globally, but the huge impact it had in Israel because of our economy, which, by the way, is the reason we pretty much, the 2008 global crash really didn't impact us that dramatically because we had gone through 2001, we had made the necessary adjustments and steps and so on and so forth. But when that happened, then we were still a channel completely supported by the cable operators. We just launched the first paid channel in the market, Sport 5 Plus. We had about $8 million out in loans from the banks, and Tavel, which was then the largest cable operator in the market, which then they all merged into what is now known as HOT. They went under. They went bankrupt as a result of that. And we were in a position where we were no longer getting about 60% of our funding, of what we had been promised, of our revenue from the operators. And it was a bad moment. It was really, really difficult. It changed the whole nature of the final years at the channel. And I don't need to tell you about it because you were really part of the team that was dealing with it. Because you were basically our head of traffic, de facto head of traffic, and dealing with all our international suppliers. And we had to renegotiate, and that's a very, very extremely difficult thing.
Renegotiate's a nice word.
Yeah.
The conversations I had to have with a lot of our suppliers back then were tough.
And the problem is that the global economy wasn't really reeling like we were reeling.
Yeah.
And which was probably different in 2008. And you had to deal with that too. But it was very, very difficult. It was we stayed through again a lot of very, very off the very, very creative. Not you want to be creative to do good things. Everybody is creative in order to survive, but you instead one step ahead of Chapter 11 basically. And we ended up doing it. We ended up doing it successfully because the work of a lot of very talented, skilled people who thought out of the box, yourself included. And and we survived it. And I think even after I left the channel, they were still dealing with a lot of ways. But
I remember it very well. Obviously, it's interesting you brought up that as the black hole. It makes total sense. I mean, I remember it from the perspective of being an employee at the channel. And actually, one of my strongest memories back then was, and here I just want to pay you a very, very big compliment, because it's when a company's doing well and when the market's going well, it's a lot easier to be the CEO. CEO is a very tough role, and it's a lot easier to be that CEO, and you bring the troops together, and everything's great, and it's champagne and punching the air and fantastic. It's obviously much harder to rally the troops in difficult times. And I remember very, very clearly when you got everyone, the whole channel together in that front area of the, out by the reception to give, basically to inform the employees what's going on. And this was never good news in that period. It was always bad news about things. And yet somehow you managed to still, through the bad news, make sure that we were rallied to help the survival of this organization that we were all very, very tied to. Whether people had worked for the organization for 10 years or for a month, you could feel that we were all tied. It was like a family. And that was something that comes from the top, always. And I remember I learned a lot from you about how to rally troops in difficult times. And you managed and succeeded. So maybe you see it as a black hole, and I totally get that. But the exit from that black hole was nothing short of a triumph, I think, for you personally, as I see it, from my memory, and for everyone that was involved in it. But it all comes from the top. And that's just one of my memories from the sports channel about how times were incredibly difficult. But having you there to say, I'm not going to run away from it, I'm not going to hide in my office, I'm going to call everyone for a meeting. And you did it quite often, every time you felt that you needed to share the latest round of bad news.
Hey, I needed to talk to people. I needed to talk. Well, listen, Israelis, you asked how it happened. Israelis are fighters, first of all. They're fighters by nature. So they're always up for a fight if they see, the cause is just. Also, think about the fact that, wow, working for the sports channel is like a big thing. People really love the fact they were working for something that was such a kind of sexy organization. And they didn't want to lose that. And plus, how lucky are you, me, we all, to be able to work in sports?
Absolutely.
And those are really the things, the glue that I kind of played on to keep us together. And I think everybody bought into it. And it was, I've said in the past, when I was, thinking about what we wanted to do with the sports channel in terms of production, in terms of, broadcast, whatever, I would think of myself sitting, as a kid on my sofa back in Portland, Oregon, watching, sports on the weekend, which is the only time you could watch sports back then, and what I wanted to see. And that's what I thought. I said, okay, what do I want to do here? I want to see what I would like to see as a viewer. And it was the same thing here. What can I say? I would like to say things that I want to hear, as long as they're realistic. I don't want, I don't want to have it sugar-coated or anything like that. So that was really, the only thing I could do, and it was what I really believed in anyway. I really believed we would get out of it, because, I believe we had, we would figure this out one way or the other. We had something that so many people wanted to have, a product that was a must-have product. I don't know, nobody knew what it was going to look like on the other end, but I figured we'd come out of it. It was just a matter of keeping people's faith, and I just played on those, various things that I knew were very relevant in my thinking, and I guess it was basically what other people were thinking also.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, over the 20 plus years in the sports industry, anyone who works with me, I keep telling them, don't forget for a second just how fortunate we are. The vast majority of the population do not work in something that they are emotionally tied to. I mean,
right.
I don't want to go into this follow your passion. It's a discussion for another time. But something you're emotionally tied to, something that we feel from our childhood, to be working in that day in, day out is a privilege that none of us should forget any time. And it really is a joy. It allows you to treat it not like work. I mean, people sometimes say to me, wow, you work so hard. I actually don't feel that. I work a lot. I just don't think I actually work that hard, because I just enjoy being around this. And not all my areas of work or any of our areas of work are stuff we enjoy. But it's the wrapping of being in that sport, which is really a privilege, and long may it continue.
Yeah.
So I mentioned, how you were as a boss and a CEO. Let's have an opportunity here to give a bit of a compliment to someone, to big up one of a founder maybe that we've met along the way. Not maybe we, but you. Involved in this industry for a long time, and now in the investor side. Give us an example of one founder that you think is standout? And it doesn't have to be a company that you've invested in. Because you come across a lot of people, and sometimes you'll invest, sometimes you won't. It's not necessarily because you don't believe in the founder. And it could be something that's not even on the investment side.
Yeah.
Give me an example, give our listeners an example of someone who you think is a standout founder, because we all know it's all about the execution, and that person who sits at the top is so critical. Who's a standout founder in your... Here's an opportunity to say bravo to someone.
Wow, that's a tough one. How many companies did we source? Have we sourced at Mindspring? Not that I've sourced, not that I've been involved in all of them, but
it's close to 1,000, I think, or even
yeah,
more than that. But it could be outside of that. It could be someone you've come across in your consultancy.
Right.
Someone who's in your mind as someone like, that guy is someone who's an outlier, is a top founder.
Well, besides sports, one of the things I really like is music. Part of the after sports thing I like is music. And I get a lot of conversation with friends about, favorite bands and great eras of music. And, when anybody asks what my favorite band is, they're asking, where the hell am I going?
I have no idea. I'm listening.
And, we always say, okay, they say, what are your favorite bands? I go, well, in what? I mean, metal, progressive rock, Brit rock, whatever. Give me the... But whatever the realm is that I give my favorite bands, I always have one caveat. And I say that the Beatles, never mention the Beatles because they're somewhere up here. They're extraterritorial. They're special amongst themselves, and they are the greatest ever. So I'm going to mention somebody now that I'm not going to talk about him as greatest fan of, but he's somebody that we all both know, we both admire and respect, and he's up here, and that's Sandy Count. He's our partner. So I don't want to say he's a great, he is, I think, the ultimate founder, but as he's our partner, and I want to be completely transparent here, I'm putting him up on the level of the Beatles.
I don't care if we're not objective. I agree totally. Sandy is an outlier. He is incredible. He has the combination of his humility, his expertise, his experience, and he's immensely wise. 100% agree. Love Sandy. Amazing guy. Yeah. So Sandy's the Beatles?
Sandy's the Beatles.
All right.
So who then is, let's say...
the best of the rest.
Who? My favorite band, maybe? You.
You put me aside.
No, seriously. You are an amazing founder. Look what you've built here. I mean, the fact that,
This is not about me. He's dragging.
No, but it's serious. It's not a mutual admiration society. I really believe it. I mean, Daniel's built something that's truly amazing. He's built a culture. Thousands of Israelis have come working for him, and a lot of them are still here. Others have gone to develop into different areas, and not only in sports tech but in other technological areas as well. Walking through the halls of their offices, it's just an amazing experience. People are so happy to be here. You walk, you see the food they're offered. You see they're sitting out talking, in their breaks, having a great time. They have events. I mean, it's the fact that you've turned this business into what you've turned it into financially from a business point of view, is amazing in and of itself. We won't obviously go into that here, but business is supposed to make money as well. Well, you've done that very well. And I mean, it's all really your vision and your.
I was very fortunate to have a lot of amazing people around me the whole time. That's for sure.
Yeah, the greatest founders always say that.
Oh, come on! For our listeners on Spotify, they can't see I'm blushing at the moment. Probably a bit too dark skinned anyway for anyone to notice. But let's leave. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. It's very nice. I think you're totally unobjective, but that's okay. Let's put me aside. That wasn't where I was going with that at all.
Obviously, that's why I did it.
Yeah. Come on. Let's give a founder that's not Sandy Count and not me.
Okay.
A good word.
Well, because the question was so hard, and there's no really one founder. I'm getting now. At least I'm able.
Now you're thinking about a lot of them now.
Yeah, exactly. That's a tough one. Also, if I have to eliminate Sandy and eliminate you, but I think, again, all the founders that we've invested in, for example, at Mindspring, are all amazing. I mean, they all have basically they have an A to Z. So it's really, really hard. I mean, maybe there's some that, certain areas are lacking, but they more than make up for it in other areas as well. And they're, incredibly worthy of investment. And, I've gone.
Mylan, get over it. One. We're losing viewers. Come on.
I would have to say that then that one would be Donnie White.
Oh, great choice.
Satisfying Labs.
Great choice. Donnie is, Why? I mean, for people who don't know Donny, and definitely that's something that should be corrected. Everyone should really get an idea of who Donny is, but explain why you think that he is in that position.
Well, he has all the traits that you want to have as a founder anyway. I mean, a vision, hard work, knows how to get the best out of people, understands what he's doing, what problem he's solving, is able to adapt as things change, deal with setbacks, and maintain a total even keel when results aren't good, when they are good, even though we've seen very little not good results of Donny. But I think when you say, I think seeing what he did in his business in COVID, which obviously, his business is built on spectators attending sporting events. Yeah. We won't get into exactly what he's doing, but it's called Satisfied Labs. Look it up. It's an amazing company. That, what he did, his ability to continue to grow revenue at that time, because he thought out of the box,
unbelievable,
pivoted, for me was amazing. And every time I want to call with him, again, I'm not on that many investor calls with him because, other people in Mindspring kind of deal with him. But ones I've been on, I've really been blown away by him.
I think so. I think when we think about startup, the whole startup ecosystem, it's always a roller coaster. People use that word all the time. There's ups, there's downs. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And to have a founder, a CEO at the top level that retains the composure, I think that's what I also get that feeling from Donny as well. He doesn't matter the ups, downs. He's totally focused on the end game and what he's trying to do, and that will filter down to all the people so that people can survive the roller coaster through knowing that we're going through it, whether it's down today, up tomorrow. I'm just going to keep the composure and stay focused. I totally agree. That's the impression that you get when you talk to Donny, and it's a quality of a very, very good founder. I think it's a fantastic choice. So I pushed you. It took you a while to get that name up. I think you.
Well, no, I've had three founders I think are the greatest, and I've mentioned them all. Whether you like it or not.
All right, shut up now. All right, so one last question for you, Mylan. So we've talked about your past and how you're thinking about things in the moment. What about the future? I mean, you're still a young man. You still act like a young man. What's next for my own? Not necessarily what's next, but what do you want to? What's the next big thing that you'd love to be involved in?
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure if I really want to think about what's next. I mean, my age now. It's like interesting thought because I never really think in those terms. I kind of think on a day-to-day basis, which has its advantages and its disadvantages, I guess. First of all, I love what I'm doing now. I love what we're doing at Mindspring. I hope that the market improves a bit so we can get back to looking at early stage startups and continue to invest in them. I love what I'm doing at the Israeli Premier Football League. I think what we've done to Israeli football is kind of we've made it a better product, made it more aesthetic, made it more better produced, organized it, made it
a very professional product.
Yeah. Even the football might not be at the highest level, but I think we've created a very polished product, implementing a lot of technologies, kind of completing the revolution to a certain extent, or continuing the revolution that we started back in 1999 when we got to the right. Now I'm doing it from the league point of view. So I'm very happy with that. And what I'm doing now with the business partnerships division of the zone is really great because it's looking at things on a global basis, which I've always wanted to do. And with my longtime partner Aviv Giladi. So I'm really happy with what I'm doing now. I really hope it continues. And but I think what I've found out over all the years is not having something not being a salaried employee or whatever. You have to constantly reinvent yourself. And at the beginning, maybe I saw that as a challenge, but now I kind of see it as almost one of the not perks. That's probably taking it a little too far, but something that is you know how to do it, and you do it, and it leads you and the things that you're involved in now lead to other things and allow you to to again reinvent yourself. And so I look forward to the next challenge, which I'm sure is going to come because they always end up coming. And the only thing I can say is I'm 100% sure that will be in the area of sports media. And that's the only thing I know, for better or for worse. And that is a world and a universe in and of itself.
Wonderful. What a lovely note to finish on, Mylan. It's been a real pleasure having this chat with you. Wishing you all the best of luck going forward with all of those efforts. I look forward to seeing it pan out.
And it's mutual.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.